Good afternoon, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here today. We are going to be talking about the current and future state of brand safety. Jay, let's jump right in. Mastercard has one of the highest brand safety standards in the industry, with almost 0% tolerance for risk. Tell us how you're thinking about brand safety and how you're navigating with standards that high in such a complex and crowded content media space.
Yeah, we'd like to think about this broadly, because I think it requires us to have a broad understanding of how we go to market and how brand safety fits within that. So, some of the context, that helps inform our approach is really understanding the consumer behavior and our role within that. So we have a priceless campaign that's 25 years young, and there's a lot of equity that we've put into that. And ultimately, Mastercard is a trust mark. It stands for a trust mark in the industry. And so, we are responsible as brand stewards to ensure, that brand continues to stand for trust. And as we think through that, we realize that consumer attention also is changing. Ultimately, we are all dealing with a ton of screen time, competing with the enormity of everything that's out there today. 20, 30 years ago, consumers were exposed to on average 500 ads a day. I mean, today it could be upwards of 10,000, right? And so ultimately, unfortunately, the consumer attention span is less than a goldfish today. It's eight seconds. And, that determines, the way that we go to market. And ultimately, we are not a reach-based advertiser anymore. We're an experience-based advertiser. And so I bring all of that context around because, brand safety, we have to think about brand safety through the lens also of attention and how we maximize attention, and how we maximize impact and experience. The other bit of this that is, kind of a new dimension of us, thinking about brand safety is also around sustainability. We've done a lot of analysis just on Mastercard's carbon footprint, and marketing contributes a decent amount of our overall carbon footprint. And a lot of that comes from digital advertising, especially digital video. And so, when we think about going to market in the most brand safe, ethical, responsible way, it's brand safety plus attention plus sustainability.
This is a really unique approach. I talk to brands a lot about brand safety, and I think that you are speaking about it in a very different way, about putting those three separate topics together in one. Can you talk to us a little bit more about how you've developed that framework and how you're then applying it and how Mastercard goes to market?
Yeah. So, it first started with us understanding consumer behavior and the role that we want to play within that. So we have a really strong passion strategy. We've understood kind of what our consumers' passions are and how we connect with them. Ultimately, it's really about engaging the consumers that we serve. Kind of based on that passion strategy, we've created certain relationships with big tentpoles like the Grammys in the U.S. or Major League Baseball. We have the Brits and certain tennis tournaments like Roland Garros. And so really thinking about kind of like core passions like sports, culinary, travel, music. Once you break that down, we have to figure out how we show up in that. A lot of that, is on the ground, kind of these physical events that we carefully curate, not only, kind of through Mastercard, but with our customers. And, we spend so much time carefully curating on the ground. We need to ensure that, kind of that digital experience that ultimately amplifies these on the ground tentpoles, whether that's kind of pre-event, during the event, post-event, has that same level of curation around it. And so, because of that, we want to be inextricably linked to these events itself. It's not about interrupting, consumers. We think of ourselves as an extension of these events. We create content that is part of that event. And so ultimately, when we think about brand safety, it is also thinking about how we become part of that moment itself and the experience that we create with consumers. We like to say for every dollar that we spend, we'd like to earn at least $1 back, in that conversation and that cultural resonance.
It really resonates with what Nespresso was talking about earlier today about really injecting into the moment itself instead of being aligned with it. This approach with audience attention plus sustainability plus brand safety as one unique lens sounds like a challenge to measure. How are you approaching that, and how are you taking all of those data points and putting them together to point where you go forward and where you show up?
Yeah, when we talk about a tech stack, I think maybe our tech stack probably looks a little bit different than other people's tech stacks. There's obviously the audience understanding, and trying to get a little bit more precise in who we're talking to and how we're talking to them. We work really closely with IAS, and so we've embedded all of their technology from a brand safety standpoint into our tech stack. From a sustainability standpoint, we have carbon calculators that we work with, and taking all of that data and ingesting it into our planning tools with our agency. And then that last piece also with attention. We have 7 years of panel data that we've been working on with partners like Lumen and ingesting that into our planning tools so we can plan based on maximizing attention or impact while minimizing our carbon footprint and doing it in a way that we feel comfortable is showing up in the right contextual space.
This is really interesting because you mentioned a lot of partners here: tech providers, agency, the brand itself, maybe a partner like a publisher. What are your thoughts on the role that we all play together? Is there room for collaboration in creating a possibly unified brand safety measurement, or at least an environment what we are all committing to that we can feel safe about? What are your thoughts?
Well, I feel passionate about this as a business professional, beyond just, my role at Mastercard. I also sit on the steerco of GARM, who spend a lot of time thinking about this and, working with like-minded brands, like-minded publishers, and tech providers so we can figure out the right industry standards and approach. I mean, that's what it really comes down to, especially when it comes to this new world of sustainability.
Yeah.
There are a whole new set of standards that we're going to have to think about in terms of, kind of what a sustainably sourced media even means. And this requires us to create new definitions and terms and standards. It has to be an industry approach.
You mentioned earlier that Mastercard is seen as a trust brand. What does that mean in an era when all consumer trust is at an all-time low? I mean, there's low levels of trust that's been measured in news, in media, amongst influencers, brands, all of it. Nobody is really understanding how do we navigate through this complex landscape and defaulting to the lowest common denominator of these are the few that I can trust. What role do brands play, in Mastercard specifically, in building up that trust?
Yeah, I think that's why we're taking an experience-based approach, and not an advertising or interruption-based approach. Yeah. My brief when I started at Mastercard was take everything you know about media, rip it up, start again. That's a pretty interesting brief.
Go do that.
Yeah. And here we are, which is why it takes, I think a full industry to do that. So, we really hold ourselves responsible for figuring out how to provide the best experience for the consumers that we serve. And ultimately, we think that could require a little bit of evolution in the way that we go to market. So we don't feel like we are just interrupting, consumers while they're watching their favorite content. And I think, there is more that we can do collectively to create better experiences for those consumers, beyond just stuff on the ground. I think, reframing media as experience, I think is really what is my brief.
This is really interesting to me. Talk to me a little bit more about that idea of creating experience in the digital space and beyond just live events. So we've talked a lot about live events today and being and listening to the consumer. What does it mean, or what do you envision for a future state of really creating that experience in a digital space?
Yeah, so I'll give an example of the way that we activated around the Grammys earlier in the year. We are led by our purpose, and one of those purposes is sustainability. We have a Priceless Planet coalition that we work on with other like-minded corporations, where we want to plant hundreds of millions of trees over the next decade. So, sustainability is near and dear to our heart. And, again, that's part of why we also understand, our own carbon footprint so we can walk the walk. So the way that we showed up in the Grammys being a sponsor, it comes with a relationship with CBS and advertising inventory. We could have just run, a few 30-second ads and been, kind of shoulder content or, just around the show. But, we wanted to figure out how to create a unique experience that, was additive to the program itself. So we worked, creating content. And so we actually created a music video kind of inside the program, working with CBS itself, and created a kind of a whole sustainability angle within that. And so the point being is that we kind of reimagined advertising time as content that was an extension of the Grammys itself, and then use social media to create shoulder content in and around it.
That makes a lot of sense. As you were saying, creating the experience, thinking about from a multi-channel experience of having content both on TV, social, everywhere to create a unified message, but also in a sustainable way. Beginning to see how all the parts come together. I imagine you're not doing this all by yourself. What does the team structure look like of how you're taking the data itself that you talked about earlier, but also then thinking about the opportunities, when to partner with the CBSs, or when to find the right moments to put that together? What is that? What does the structure look like of how you're putting all those things together at Mastercard?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's an interesting coalition now, and that we have built out kind of a team internally that is more of an integrated, kind of marketing team. We have people that, have media backgrounds and have content backgrounds and social and digital, but we sit as one integrated team, kind of building these experiences together. And then we operate the agencies in the same way. We have an interagency team that comes up with a big idea. It doesn't matter who comes up with the idea, So it starts with, understanding, consumer behavior and that really core consumer insight. From there comes a big idea. And then we activate around it. Nice. But then from there, to actually execute, kind of the maximizing attention, minimizing carbon, that's where some of the tech stack comes in, working with our agency partners. Like I said, we have carbon calculators that we work with. We have, teams that are analyzing all of our carbon footprints, in 100+ countries with electrical grids that are different everywhere. And so, even a 10 megabyte digital social video that runs in Mexico has a much different carbon profile than it would in France, just because France works more on, on nuclear energy rather than coal, right? And so these are all the things that we have to start to analyze and then create process around.
Easy task, just a Tuesday.
Exactly.
I love that. One of the things you said when we were talking earlier is really about this idea of doing well by doing good. Would love to talk to hear you talk a little bit more about that and how that concept is really shaping how you're thinking about engaging with your customers.
Yeah. So, I think that other dimension, beyond kind of just our passion strategy is, we're really guided by our purpose, which is all around inclusivity. And, it starts with financial inclusivity and making sure that, we raise the tent high enough for everybody to fit underneath. But we've spent a lot of time, really understanding the dimensions of inclusivity, and going to market in a way that ultimately is beneficial to the people that we serve is key to it really is fundamental to how we go to market. And I think that shows up in some of the programs and products that we've created. We have been working with the industry to even rethink some of our core products. So we created a true name card about 3 years ago, kind of just recognizing that, there are people that are transitioning that don't necessarily identify with their given name. But, credit cards, are usually tied to your bank statements and tied to your legal name. And, again, it kind of goes back to these, kind of insights, when we were talking with certain consumers, like that was a pain point for them to actually use their credit card, at merchants because they didn't look like what their name was on the card. And so we actually worked with the entire industry and created a true name card.
That's amazing and very inclusive. Very good. So I want to switch topics for just a little bit. I'm still staying within brand safety. There's been a lot of discussion around generative AI throughout all the panels today. And obviously, that has the potential of creating some very unique brand safety issues and questions of authenticity for brand messaging itself, like having fake Mastercard messaging, as well as appearing in contexts which are not real. Tell me a little bit more about how you're thinking about generative AI at Mastercard, and are you using it for good?
Yeah, I guess through the lens of brand safety, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, now that consumers have these tools to create content, with a push of a button, I think that makes it even tougher. I think, kind of just this idea of keeping our brand safe, and the idea of attention, being able to break through. There's going to be more content than ever that are competing for people's attention. Some of it real, some of it fake, right? And so, like I said, I also sit on the steerco of GARM. I mean, we spend a lot of time thinking about, what are the right standards? How do we hold the platforms accountable? Kind of working with publishers to ensure that we all are aware of what is synthetically generated and what is real. And so, that is going to be a job, I think, for all of us to do, I think, moving forward, is figuring out what are those right guidelines that ultimately create the proper transparency, for consumers and for brands to understand, kind of the context of the content around them.
100%. I definitely think there's a path forward of this collaboration between different entities in the media space working together to first develop that transparency. That is that building block for getting that first level of trust. Have you ever? The flip side of brand safety is when it doesn't go well. It certainly gets a lot of press when it doesn't go well. Have you ever experienced that when has anything ever gone wrong?
No, never, of course not. Yeah, and the problem, or the issue with all that is sometimes all it takes is one impression. When we've had issues in the past, there's
part of that 1%.
Yeah, I mean, it is. These are outlier issues, but I think we happen to be a company that, if something does happen to be in a brand safe place, somebody seems to notice it, and we tend to get called out for it. And so we are attuned to that. We're also a company that operates in many countries, and we're somewhat decentralized in the way that we go to market. And so that's what keeps me up at night, is that, not all of it is necessarily, kind of centralized and controlled by my team. And so, this also is creating the right processes, trainings, education with, kind of all of the folks that have hands on keyboards.
No, that's really interesting. I was just going to ask about that. Do you have like a team? Is it just your team that is focused on brand safety, or is that something that everyone across the company is cognizant of? It's part of their job. This is what we do here, or is it very much set to the side of these are the experts and we just do what they say?
No, I mean, it's definitely the former. I mean, we want to make sure that, people are empowered and understand, how to approach this in the right way, and how to use the tools. Because there are, many people that have hands on keyboard, and we want to make sure, just as a company, we all understand that, what's at stake, because we're all brand stewards for the company. And so, this is a lot of work that we do, is training, kind of the right people inside the company. And it does go all the way up to our CEO, so it is part of, what is in everybody's, responsibility and job description.
It's what you do.
It's what we do.
Love it. Also, Mastercard has worked a lot with celebrities and alignments and partnerships with people who have their own recognized brands. What is the process of really vetting who you have partnerships? We heard a lot of panels earlier today talking about how their selection process is, what the alignment is with the brand. What does that look like from a brand safety perspective for Mastercard of choosing who you're partnering with, whether it be a celebrity or it be a media partner?
Yeah, we obviously have a very rigorous process, again, both internally with our comms team, with our comms agencies. And it comes down to our values, our passions, and the personas, the segments of folks that we want to talk to. And I think we've been fairly successful, almost like a investment strategy. You kind of want to buy low and sell high, but we've been, I think fairly successful in identifying ambassadors kind of on the way up, and being able to work with with folks that really are authentic to our purpose and passion, and they share that same passion. There has to be a shared DNA in the way that they want to communicate and what's important to their brand. And ultimately, if you don't have that authenticity, it doesn't seem to work.
Yeah, it's interesting too, though, like the risk that is taken on too with doing partnerships, because you don't have full control of their brands and what happens when they might run afoul or do things a little bit outside of the lines of what you'd like to do. Is there a process in place to evaluate that, of when you continue to partner or when you decide to cut ties?
Yeah, I would say that we definitely have, kind of a focused way of how we like to engage together, usually around our big tentpole programs. And so, I think maybe it's contained in that way that, there are specific moments in time around, kind of our big tentpole programs where, we tend to leverage our ambassadors. And so, it works for us, but I feel like, we've created the right space and the right relationships, kind of with our ambassadors. And I think it kind of goes to your first point around, kind of how we vet, and, I think that kind of goes into the selection process. And, when we sit and talk with them at the beginning, just really understanding what they want to accomplish, kind of with the relationship, and kind of setting those rules in advance.
But you've done an impressive job of developing a framework, a lens to approach it, and navigating the very complex current state of media. Would love to talk about the future state of brand safety, which is part of our panel. Do you see the world getting more complex? Or, as some of the panels were talking about earlier, are we going back towards 1950s advertising and more integration, where it gets simpler just by sheer selection by audiences? What do you think the future state looks like for brand safety? Does it get better, or does it get harder?
I think a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Just to go back to your kind of Gen AI question before, kind of one of the things that we're thinking about, and the way that we're approaching it, which kind of maybe talks to where the future is going. We work really closely with small businesses, and again, one of the insights that we had is that kind of most small businesses struggle to succeed in that first 12 to 18 months, but kind of even more so if you're an underrepresented entrepreneur, women of color. And usually that big differentiator, tends to be mentorship. Having somebody that's kind of walked in your path and understands understands how to navigate and deal with some of the very specific issues that you have to deal with. And so, what we realize is that, kind of Gen AI actually can solve some of that, but Gen AI itself is biased, right? And so we actually decided that we would build our own kind of large language model trained with publishers, and doing that training with publishers in an ethical way, paying for that content, not scraping the content, licensing it in an ethical way, and building and training the model, and building essentially a small business AI mentor for underrepresented, small business entrepreneurs. And, this is something that we feel really passionate about. It again, it's part of our purpose, and kind of that passion around small businesses. I bring that up kind of in kind of the larger sense of your question, because I think we're going to have these tools where people can start to ask questions and create experiences. In that way, it might be a much simpler world. But I think as we leverage more technology, there's this paradox that, I think technology gets us more precision, but in a way, we get less transparency.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it might get harder. We want to make sure that we have that transparency and that contextual placement, and ultimately the power to kind of choose and create the bespoke experiences that we want.
Yeah, I think it's kind of come full circle of what we were talking about earlier about really making sure that we are building that collaboration across tech providers, agencies, brands, publishers, all of us working together to really start at transparency, to build that trust, to hopefully make all of our lives a little bit easier, just a little bit.
Let's hope.
As we're moving forward. Anything else that you wanted to talk about on brand safety, or anything you wanted to mention?
I really appreciated this opportunity. I just want to underscore that, I do think that it will take all of us to get around the table to figure out how to create the right consumer experience, that ultimately is great for publishers as well. We have to figure out, as the industry evolves, not to take a 20th century ad model and put it onto 21st century technology.
So we're not talking about whitelists and blacklists anymore. Thank God. All right, this has been wonderful talking with you, and I'm excited to collaborate with everyone on our future of brand safety.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. I think this fantastic session, we can maybe take one. It got really hot, sorry. Maybe we can take one question. Anybody? I think this is such an interesting topic conversation here, because sometimes brand safety might be something that you think like just gets relegated over to the side, or to like hand it off to someone else. And I love how how you are so vested in this for lots of great ways or reasons, and it can all of the negatives that can be connected with brand safety. With what I think is interesting is the flip side of that, all the tools to help mitigate things like using really good contextual, AI-powered contextual to avoid the truly bad content, make sure that you're not over-blocking. All of those same tools can be used to put your ads and do the opposite. Put your ads in front of minority-owned publishers to help make sure you're funding quality media, diverse voices. So these tools are really powerful for lots of reasons, and I think it's important to know that and understand when you're using some of them, if you can put them to use to solve other problems too. So it's an interesting one. I really appreciate your perspective. One more round of applause.